Okay, so if you have a cube, make a sphere. If you have a cylinder, make a sphere. If you have anything else other than a sphere, make a sphere. Then what we need to do is, hopefully you also have in your assets folder a bunch of different folders, right? The folders you want, and these are kind of, I mean, it's up to you, but the standard way of doing a Unity project is to have a folder for materials, a folder for prefabs, a folder for scenes, a folder for scripts, and a folder for textures. So you can always make new folders. You click on Assets, which comes with your Unity project, and you say Create Folder and make new folders. All right. So you should have in your Textures folder, you should have an 8K moon texture. And then what we need to do, I'm going to get rid of this, delete the extra copy of it. What we need to do is create a material. So go into Materials. This is one that we auto-created. I'm going to get rid of that one too. And you can right-click here and say Create Material. And then you want to name this. Call it Moon. I'm calling mine Moon 2 because I already have a moon. If you've already done this, you don't have to do it again. And then what you want to do is this default texture uses a shader called Standard, which is kind of reflective and makes the moon look shiny, which isn't really what we want. So you want to change the shader over here to Mobile, which is optimized for devices. Diffuse. Okay, and then you'll notice over here it says None Texture. You can select a texture from your Textures folder and select that, and then you should see down your texture looks kind of like the moon. Now on your sphere that you have here, you can drag that texture onto the sphere, and it should make it look like the moon. Everybody with me? You all have a moon? Yeah. What? Yeah? Yeah. Should I give anybody more time? All right. How much more time? All right. Here, let me just look at you guys so I can see where you guys are. So do you have the texture? Okay, great. And on that texture, change the texture type from default. No, which version of just make a new texture, a new material. Sorry. Yeah. Go into do you have a materials? You don't have a materials folder. Make a new folder in there called materials. 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 Okay. And now go in there. Go into your materials and right-click and create a new material. Okay. Now over here, change the red shader from Standard to Mobile Diffuse. Okay. Now on the texture, click the Select button next to that None Texture. Yep, right there. Yep, select. There we go. And choose your 8K moon. There we go. Okay, now drag this material onto your sphere. There you go. You got it. You got it. Great. Okay. So now we all have a sphere. Let me get back to my week 2 lesson plan. Alrighty then. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to make this moon into what's called a prefab. Now in Unity, you can create objects and have them sitting in your hierarchy here. But they're either going to, unless you like make them inactive or go in and disable their mesh renderer or something, you're going to see them right from the start. And what we want to do in our app is we want it to start with no moon, and in fact show like a placement indicator that sits on the planes. And once you get a placement indicator that's sitting on a flat plane, you tap on your screen and then it sticks a moon in there. And we're going to do that through instantiating this moon prefab, right? So we're actually going to get rid of the moon that's here. Don't get rid of it yet, but we're going to create it, we're going to turn it into a prefab. Then we're going to delete it. Then we're going to put in this placement indicator thing, and then we're going to write a script that turns the placement indicator on and off based on whether there's a flat plane. And whether there's a flat plane, it'll turn on the placement indicator. And when the placement indicator is turned on, then as soon as it taps, you tap anywhere on the screen, then it instantiates one of these prefabs of the moon. And when we're done, you'll be able to stick moons all over the place. Okay? All right. So you can have more than one moon because we don't know how many moons the person wants. What if they want a moon here and a moon there and a moon there? We can't start with 100 moons and just start turning them on, right? We want to instantiate a new one. So we got to have this as a prefab. So to create this as a prefab, first thing we wanted to do is have a correct registration position, which means we want, right now you see this like, what do they call that? Axes, red, green, and blue axes here. This is telling you where the moon's origin is, which is in the center of the sphere. And that makes sense. However, if we left it that way and we instantiated it on a plane, it would be halfway buried into the plane. So we're going to put it for now, we're going to move that down so that it will stick the moon on the plane. You may actually want to, at some point, make the moon be like a meter off of the plane so that when you tap on it, it's hovering above where you tapped instead of right on the floor. But for now, let's just put it right on the floor. So we're going to do that. The easiest way to offset this thing is to just create a new game object in our hierarchy over here. Create 3D object. No, create empty. Just create an empty object. And let's rename this moon. Actually, I'm going to call it with a capital M. Doesn't really matter. All right. And you'll notice that this object is, it's kind of hard to see because the sphere is in the way. If I turn it off for a second, you can see that this is sitting right on the floor. And then what we can do is we can make this sphere a child object of the moon object. And now if we instantiate this moon, oh, it's still off. Okay, so we make this a child object and also now offset this sphere to be, what is it? Your scale should be 0.1 by 0.1 by 0.1. So offset the y-axis to 0.05. And now you can see, whoops, it's the moon. If you're still highlighted on the sphere over here, the child object, you'll notice that the axes are floating up in the air. But if you highlight the moon parent object, you'll notice it's sitting right on the ground, and that's what we want. Okay? Yes.
Sitting on the ground.
Sitting on the floor plane. How did I get my grid so visible? It's a preferences thing. So you can go into preferences, colors, and what are they? Grid line and grid. How do you adjust these? I remember this is how I did it. Oh, it's there they are. Okay. Yeah, so you can change the grid to like pure white and the grid line to something a little bit brighter, and you can make these brighter. I set it this way so that it's easier for you guys to see. You don't really need to do this, but it helps. The other thing, actually, let me really quick. The other thing that's really helpful to do under preferences is under colors, the play mode tint. I think by default this is set to completely transparent, and there's no difference between play and not play mode and not play mode. And I really like to know the difference, because if you're in play mode and you make changes to things, those changes won't save. So I like to set mine to some kind of pinkish color and turn up the alpha all the way. And that way when I go into play mode, it colors my thing like that, so I always know that that's what's going on. I'm in play mode, and I never get confused. Okay, so we have a sphere so far. We have it registered properly. So if you click on the parent object moon, the origin for that is sitting right on the floor plane, the ground plane. And now we want to create a prefab. So make sure you have a prefabs folder in your assets. If you don't, click on assets, create new folder, and call it prefabs. Okay, and then all you have to do is drag the parent object that we called moon into your prefabs. And you'll notice that the moon icon over here turns blue. That tells you that that is a prefab now. Okay, so now that we have that as a prefab, we can delete it from our hierarchy. I thought you could just hit delete, but I guess not. What do I have to do? Delete. Delete. There we go. Now if I wanted to put it back in, I can easily just drag it back into my hierarchy, and there it is, exactly how we had it before, because it's a prefab and all of those settings are saved in that prefab. Okay, so if you dragged it back in, delete it again. Okay, now we want to create our placement indicator. And what we're going to do for this is have an image with an alpha channel of transparency. And if you go to Google, the one I would like to use, it's up to you really. I mean, you can use anything, I guess. But I think it'd be great if we're all on the same page. And since we're doing this Apollo demo, you go to Google and you search for Apollo logo. And then click on images. And go to tools, because we want one that has transparency in it, an alpha channel. So click on tools, and then down here, whoops, where it says color, change that to transparent, which means that these are only ones that have transparency in them. And scroll down and look for, I like this one here, the Apollo 50th anniversary, because it's the 50th anniversary of Apollo. And click on that, and then right click, whoop, or I guess, yeah, you can click on it. No, there's a better way of doing this. Let me see. I thought you could right click on it. There we go. Right click on the preview and say save image as. And you can call it Apollo. You can call it whatever you want. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and save it as Apollo. That's fine. Okay, and then now that I've downloaded that, I'm going to click show on Finder. So there it is in my Finder. I'm going to go back into Unity and get out of full screen for a minute. Click on my textures again. We're going to load this in as a texture just like we did for the moon. And drag that in. And there it is. It looks really black, and that's because it's not dealing with the transparency yet. And over here in your inspector, there's a checkbox called Alpha is Transparency. Click on that, and it should, oops, oh, sorry, and then click Apply. And then it should look more like it does on the website. Okay. Yes? Questions?
What did you press to say?
Alpha is transparency, and then click Apply.
Is that just the check mark?
No, yeah, you click the check mark, and then at the bottom of the inspector, there's this Apply button.
Got it. Thank you.
Click that. Okay? Any other questions? We're good? All right. So now we have that texture. We need to create, we're going to create a material from this just like we did before for the moon. I'm going to get rid of my moon too because I don't need it, right? This isn't, I need to check that my prefab doesn't have moon 2 as its. Oh, it does, darn it. Whatever, I'll leave it. Not worth the time. Okay, if you go into your prefab view like this that has a blue background, you're like, how the hell do I get back to my scene? Over here, you click on scenes, and then it'll put you back into your scene. I'm just going to leave my moon 2 for now. Okay, so make a new material. Make sure you're in your materials directory. Make a new material, create material. And now the shader, we're going to do not mobile this time. We're going to go down to unlit and choose transparent. Okay, and then once we have that, let's go ahead and name that material and call this placement indicator. Placement indicator. Okay, and then you can drag your texture. No, you over here. Sorry. Right here where it says none texture, hit select, and you guessed it, you click on your Apollo texture. And it will still put it on a sphere so it looks all warpy and curvy, but that's all right. They always represent materials as spheres even if you're not going to put it on a sphere. All right, so now we need to actually make something to put this on, a game object. So we need to create we're going to create another empty game object so that we have an origin that sits right on the ground plane just like we did for the sphere. And then inside of that, we are going to create a 3D object called a quad. And you can, once you make that quad, you can drag it into your game object. Oh, on this game object, rename it. Sorry. Rename it to placement indicator, I believe. Yeah, placement indicator. Placement indicator. Okay, so a quad, if I zoom in, it's one of the simplest objects in Unity. It's a two-dimensional plane that only has one side. So see when I'm on this side, it's invisible. When I'm on this side, it's not. We want it to be on the ground. So let's rotate it around the x-axis by 90 degrees. Okay, and actually I should be in this. Yeah, this is my forward orientation, I believe. I think I was looking at things sideways. Okay, so now that we have our placement indicator, we can go back, make sure you have your quad child object highlighted, and you can drag the material placement indicator onto that quad, or onto the quad here, either way. And you should see that. Has everybody got that? Cool, so now we have our placement indicator. All right, it's time to script. So, go into your scripts folder in your assets. If you don't have one, make one. Again, go to assets, right click, say new create folder, and make a scripts folder. Scripts, C-R-I-P-T-S, scripts. Okay, so then make sure you're in your scripts folder and create a C# script. And before you click off of this, the easiest way to do this is while it's still highlighted, name this script and call it AR tap controller. And look at the way I punctuated this. Capital A, capital R, capital T, and capital C, but everything else is lowercase. AR tap controller. Then click off of it. If you clicked off of it before, then you might have some problems, which is one of the things I did this morning that caused me like headache, where the body of it is not referencing the right name. You have to like name it right when you create it and keep that name. If you change the name, like if it's called new behavior script, and then you go inside the script and you change its name, there's something else in that script that you have to change or it won't work. So, but if you make sure to click on it, to give it a name before you click off of it, it'll avoid that problem. All right, so now you have the C# script. It's an empty C# script, but you can double click on it and it should launch. No, don't save that. It should launch Visual Studio. These are stuff I was working on. Whatever. Okay. Man, why is my thing so small? Can I just change the size of things to make it easier for you guys to see? Where? Displays, right. Oh, here we go. I don't want to do anything that's going to cause my thing to stop recording. Accessibility.
But also you can zoom in.
Oh, that's what I'll do if I think that's going to mess up my.
Probably go under the preferences of
Display. Where? Right here. Cursor size.
Oh, sorry. My eyes really bad. I thought that's a different size. Don't.
No. Oh well, I'm sorry guys. Now I'll try to fix this for next week. I'll just keep zooming in on things for now. Whoops. Not Xcode. Go away Xcode. All right. So we're in we should launch Visual Studio. Does everybody have Visual Studio launch?
Yep.
Yeah, great. And so you'll see huh? In view, where's that?
In view in
settings, system preferences?
No, it's not in the computer, it's in Visual Studio.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
yeah, you're right. Yeah. Zoom in. Here we go. View, zoom in, Command plus. Command plus, 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 plus. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. All right. All right. Cool. So you can see that this should say public class AR tap controller mono behavior. If it says public class new behavior script, then you're going to have a bad day or a bad morning like I did. All right. So it should say AR tap controller there. All right. Now the first thing we need to do, and so I hope that all of you have seen this before and maybe done a little coding in this before. If you haven't, that's okay, but it's just going to be a little tougher for you. And please, like, try and stop me if I get too far or you don't understand what I'm doing. Yeah, so these are your collections up here. This is what these are like the libraries of commands that you'll be referencing down here, and then everything that you're going to be writing pretty much after these using statements will be below this public class AR tap controller mono behavior. And then you have two methods that are given to you off the bat. One's called void start, which is called once when you first hit play, and void update, which is called every single frame, every time the frame is updated. Okay? So the first thing we need to do, and they give us some collections right off the bat. They give us system collections generic, and the Unity engine. We need to add some stuff that has to do with AR here. And we need to say using, and you can, anytime it does a fill-in for you, and you like what it's filling in, you can just hit the return key and it will fill that in for you. Using Unity engine, and you can also arrow down dot xr.ARFoundation, and then make sure you put a semicolon. Pretty much most of your lines, unless it's like a conditional, like an if statement or something like that, is going to end with a semicolon. And then also using Unity Engine .xr .AR subsystems. Okay. On mine, you'll notice that some of these are grayed out. That doesn't mean anything. What it means is that you haven't actually used anything in that library yet in your code. So like if you're done with your whole code and you've noticed that something, one of your collections up here is grayed out, you can safely remove it from your script and it shouldn't hurt you. Okay? But we just haven't done our code yet, so that's why those are gray. Okay. I'm also going to change my void start to void awake with a capital A.
Why?
Mark, do you know the difference? I know it has to do with like, one is like when you hit the play button and the other is like when you first start Unity, I think.
Awake versus start.
Start, yeah.
Awake is when the object is called, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Or awake is when the scene is called. Start. One is when the scene is called, one is when the object is spawned.
Yeah.
I think it's something like that.
It has to do with when things are loaded. I'm not sure it matters. I think we probably could do it with start. I just know that all the examples I was going off of were using awake. And so just to avoid any issues, I went ahead and did it the way they were doing it.
Before start.
Yes, exactly. It's like an order of operations thing. Awake, it goes first,
Gotcha.
then start, then update. Okay?
Awake is when you wake up, start your day.
Yeah.
There, now you remember.
There we go. All right. So,
But it only like does this once. It's not like update.
it's the same as start, basically, where it only runs it once.
Gotcha.
It just does it before start. You can actually use awake and start if you wanted. Okay, using, we got that. Okay, the primary way to work, okay, so the first thing we need to do plane detection in ARFoundation, and this has changed since version 1 of ARFoundation, so if you see some older tutorials like that video that I posted on week 1, which is still a great video, but it's old as far as it uses ARFoundation 1.0 and things have changed since then. That one used to use everything as part of the AR session origin. Now, and plane detection was part of AR session origin. Now all of that is done with something called the AR raycast messenger. Anybody know what a raycast is? I'm looking for somebody who knows what a raycast is.
Is it something with like, I feel like I've seen it where it's like two objects and then they kind of merge.
Somewhat. I mean, what it is, it has to do with collisions. But instead of having two objects, a ray is a point on the screen, is a line extended from a point on the screen in a particular direction. And by default, it's like straight back from the camera to infinity. And you can use that to test whether that point intersects with anything, right? In physics, in Unity games, a lot of times we'll use the physics raycast, and it will basically, you can use it for guns and bullets and stuff to say if wherever I'm pointing this gun, did it intersect with an object? And if it did, then destroy the object or play a bullet hit animation or something. In physics AR raycasting, which is a different system than sorry, did I say physics? In AR Raycast Manager, which is a different system than the physics raycasting, it will tell you whether you've hit a trackable type. And the trackable types, mostly what you're interested in is planes, whether that be a horizontal plane, a vertical plane. You can also track other things like feature points, which would just be like something that the camera sees that goes from light to dark, a unique point that it can recognize. It's not that useful for what we're doing. We want to mostly use planes. So before we do that, we have to create this AR Raycast Manager. So we'll need to have an AR Raycast Manager in the session origin for this to work. We would probably want to we could probably manually add an AR Raycast Manager, but we can automatically add it if we add to the script a require component message. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to put before this AR tap controller, we're going to put this message: open bracket, require component, and again, just use the pop-ups because it'll save you time. Open parenthesis, type of, open parentheses, AR Raycast Manager. Okay, I'll give you a second to get that typed in there, because we're going to need to have an AR Raycast Manager in whatever we call this script in for it to work. Otherwise, it won't work. And we're also going to need a AR Plane Manager so that we can tell it to only look for horizontal planes or only look for vertical planes.
And we don't need a semicolon after that?
No, you don't need a semicolon after that. All right, so also now go make a require component, open parentheses, type of, open parentheses, what was it? AR Plane Manager. Plane Manager. Okay? And put an extra space in there. Makes it a little bit easier to read. So now, whenever we throw this script into an object, a game object, and we're gonna put it as a script that's part of our AR session origin, it'll automatically add to that object an AR Raycast Manager and an AR Plane Manager. We don't have to manually add those things.
Can you repeat that?
When you have a require component, whatever game object you add the script to will automatically also add the component that you've required.
Okay, I gotcha.
So that game object has all of the components it needs for this script to operate. Okay, so we got that. And we need to define we need to add a reference to the AR Raycast Manager in Start. And we're going to do that by saying, I feel like I'm missing something there. Hold on. Oh, right, there it is. Okay, great. So we need to, before the awake, after this public class, we're gonna create a variable called private AR Raycast Manager, which is the type of object this is. We're defining an object is what we're doing. And we're going to call this M_Raycast, is it capital C? Raycast Manager. And then end with a semicolon. M, all right, so this is, the M is kind of, you don't have to, like I could name this whatever, I could call it banana if I wanted to. But the M is Raycast Manager is just pointing to the fact that that's the type of object it is, a Raycast Manager. And the M underscore is something you'll commonly see in other tutorials, no matter who's doing it. It's called, it's part of what is called Hungarian notation. It's a coding practice that isn't necessary, but it's kind of standardized that visually identifies this as a member variable. It's a variable that's a member of this class, and because we're going to use it in this class. We're not going to use it outside of this class. So it's a member variable. Okay? Like I said, you could probably get away with not putting the M there, but I'm going to put the M there because if you were to search for examples of AR raycasting on the internet, you're likely to find M_raycast manager, and that will make your Google hits way easier to find and stuff. So that's why I want to try to make it kind of similar to the other stuff that I've seen online, because it helps when you're trying to find other examples if you want to add a new function that we didn't do in class, right? Okay, M_raycast manager, and in voids awake, we want to add M_raycast manager equals get component open bracket, or whatever those are called, AR raycast manager, and then an open and close parenthesis and a semicolon. Okay, so I'll give you a minute to put that in there. But basically, we're going to, first this is populated by an AR raycast manager object. That object has in its components something else called AR raycast manager, a subcomponent also called AR raycast manager. It's kind of annoying that you need to do it this way, but I'm pretty sure this is the way you need to do it. So you're saying this is referencing the component of this called AR raycast manager.
Is that the component that we required it to have at the beginning, or is it?
This component is like a subcomponent of this thing. Yeah.
Is it not the same thing?
It is the same thing, but inside of it, it's like having raycasts, and then inside of that you have a set of functions called raycasts. You have another set of functions called background or something, right? So like this is like the main component that's part of this hierarchy. Okay. It's confusingly annoying, but just this is the way most of the other things did it. I'm pretty sure you need to do it this way. This is the way that worked for me. All right, so now we're ready to use this AR raycast manager because we've defined it properly, and we've got the components on the beginning of this when we first start the thing. Every frame we're gonna want to check the world around us to check which way the camera is pointing, and identify if there's a position in front of us where there's a plane that's flat, and then if there is a detectable plane, then we're going to place our virtual object. And we're going to do that by checking the pose of the detected plane. So we're going to use a void method outside of the update method where we'll want to declare. We're going to, in here, in your update method, we are going to add a, one second. We're going to create a void method called update placement pose. Sorry, I got lost in my notes here because I made a bad description for myself. All right, so we're going to use this pose in a void method outside of the update method. So we're going to need to declare a global pose object and call that placement pose because we're going to use it for the placement indicator. So up here under where we've declared this private raycast manager, these are called global variables because you can use them inside of awake, you can use them inside of void update, you can use them inside of custom void methods that you write further down, as opposed to something that's instantiated inside of awake. I could only use it inside of awake, or sorry, not instantiated, defined inside of awake. I could only use it inside of awake. We're going to need to use this everywhere, so we need to put it up here, and it's going to be a private pose, placement pose. Okay, So we've created this pose variable called placement pose.
Is private like
Private means that it's only available inside of this script, that other scripts can't call it, and that will prevent you from having problems where one script is confused by two different functions that are both named the same thing. Okay, so now that we've created this pose, inside update, we're going to call a new void method called update placement pose in your update here. So let's go ahead and just make it, even though it's going to throw a red line error because it doesn't know what it is, but let's just go ahead and make it anyway. So here in void update, put update, and don't take anything out of the list yet because we haven't created it yet. Placement pose, open close parenthesis, semicolon, and this is referencing when you see a open close parentheses. That's a void function or a void method, meaning that it's not going to return any variable, but it's going to do something when you call it. So every single frame we're going to call this method called update placement pose. But right now it's throwing an error because it says the name update placement pose does not exist in the current context because we haven't defined it yet. So I'd like to do these void methods underneath the update method at the bottom. So down here, let's create this method, and we're going to call this private void update placement pose, open close parentheses, no semicolon, new line, open bracket, and then it should put in automatically a close bracket. Go ahead and put a return down there, and then it gives you a space to put code. And you notice that the red line went away now because now we've defined this as a void function or a void method called update placement pose. It doesn't do anything right now, but we're going to make it do something. So every time this thing is called, this is the code that it does. Something. Don't write that. It's fine. I'm just saying this is where we're going to put our code. Okay? So in this code, what we need to do, all right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take the screens, the center of the screen, because for this we're only going to use the tap to like go. We're not going to use the placement of the tap to do anything. Instead, we're going to take the very center of the screen so you don't have to tap on anything for it to give you a placement indicator. We're going to take the center of the screen and we're going to see if that, we're going to create a ray cast based on the center of the screen and see if it intersects a horizontal plane. If it intersects a horizontal plane, then we'll go ahead and turn on the placement indicator. And then when that happens and the placement indicator is turned on, a tap anywhere on the screen will put the moon down in the center of the screen where the placement indicator is indicating it's going to be placed. Okay? So first thing we need to do is define the center of the screen. And we're going to use a var, which is a local variable that's only used inside of this function as opposed to the global variables up here. Var screen center, okay, equals, and now we're going to use the camera, right? Because that's what we're seeing on the screen right now. Camera dot current, which just means the current camera that you're using in this scene instead of having to like specify a specific camera. Viewport to screen point. Viewport to screen point, and we're going to use that. So that basically is what the camera sees. We'll convert that into a screen point that's normalized from 0 to 1 and from 0 to 1, from left to right, from bottom to top. And we're going to say we want the middle of that. So we need to define the middle point as a new vector, vector 3, open parentheses, 0.5f, a float, meaning halfway to the left. 0.5 float. And it should just, the third vector, it should just leave at 0. You don't really have to put anything there. And then put a semicolon at the end of that. Okay, so now we've defined the screen center. I'm going to plug this in. Vector 3 is a vector, you got a good description of what a vector is, Mark?
It's a direction in code.
Yeah, it's like a direction, basically. Vectors, three components, x, y, and z of the vector. So we're defining, we're basically using a two-dimensional vector, but we're not defining the third dimension, so it's 0. So this is 0.5 over 0.5 up and 0, so sitting right on the screen.
So could it be vector 2?
I don't know. Let's leave it as 3. My example used a vector 3, so that's what I did. I didn't have time to test whether I could shift that to a vector 2 or not. All right, and so now we also need to, let's see, so raycast, then we're going to do this raycast manager, raycasting, and that's going to return a list of hits, but we need to create a list to put those hits in. So let's make a list called var hits equals new list. What do I call these things? Greater than, less than? I mean, they're kind of like, they're used as kind of brackets, but they're like the triangular brackets. And then this, put AR raycast hits, a raycast hit. Whoops, don't want that in there. So new var hits equals new list AR raycast hit, open close parenthesis, semicolon. So that will create, when we create the raycast, it'll create a list that we can populate with this thing called hits. We can reference with this thing called hits. Now let's go ahead and do the actual raycast, and that's m underscore raycast manager dot raycast, and then this takes some parameters where you have to tell it basically where you want the raycast to start, what you want to do with the hits, and what you want to actually, what type of thing are you looking for the raycast to hit. And so we're going to say, where do we want it to start? We defined that when we said, get off of my screen. Right here, we want it to start at screen center. So we don't have to do this whole vector 3 thing again because we defined this as screen center. So all we have to say is screen center. Okay, and comma, and then where do we want the hits to go? To the list called hits, comma, and then what type of trackable do we want? Trackable type planes, and then semicolon. Okay, so that will do when that's called.
Hey Jackson,
Yes.
your head is covering the text.
Wah, wah. Somebody move the projector again.
Oh. Sorry, Char.
Oh, it's fine.
And I called you Char again, sorry.
It's also okay.
You did too much coding and you can't help but call you Char.
I really don't mind.
All right. Maybe that will keep my head out of the screen. Sorry about that. Daniel must have moved it because I did this last week too.
Maybe it's like sagging.
Maybe, who knows? All right, is this better? Can you see over my head? Do I need to like? Maybe that's a little better. A little shorter now. All right, what are we doing on time? Oh my God, 3:14. Jesus, we'll be lucky if we get through this script. Okay, so now we've populated a list of any raycasts that hit a plane, and it's in hits. So we're going to use this raycast method. We already said that. The raycast method requires the parameters. We already said that. We've done that. We've done that. We've done that. Okay. So after this raycast is called, this thing here, after it's called, that will create a list in hits rather, and that list will either be null if it didn't hit anything, or it will create, it'll have between one or more members of that list of all the different things it hit. And we're just going to use the first one because chances are that was the first plane that it hit, and that's the one you want. So we're going to create a bool to keep track of if there are detected planes, and use that bool to turn on and off that placement indicator. So where do you think the bool goes? It's going to be a private bool. Probably under here, underneath private pose, right? Private bool. You know what a bool is? It's short for Boolean operator. It basically is a 1 or a 0, and what it means is true or false. So private bool, let's call this placement pose is valid. Okay? We could, if we want, we can leave it that way, and by default this will be false. Or if we want to make it more explicit, which isn't really necessary, you could say equals false. And see how it makes that kind of dimmer, saying that this is not really needed.
Let you do that?
Yeah.
Oh. I have a memory that it doesn't. I could be wrong.
I think it does. It just says that this is initializing a field by default value is redundant.
Oh.
It doesn't need to do it. But you can do it for your own edification if it makes you feel better.
You can't do that.
Right. Let's just not do it. How about that? There we go. All right. So now we have this thing called placement pose is valid, and you should remember that. And here, I'll just do it this way. False by default. If you ever want to comment your code, it's the same way as like on Arduino or anything else. It's // whack whack, and you can then put whatever you want after that whack whack on the same line. Like a duck. Yeah, false by default. Okay, so now we have that placement pose is valid bool. And private bool, yeah, we got that. Set the bool with hits.count is greater than 0. And where the heck are we doing that? Okay. We're going to create a new method called, why didn't I put this in the notes? Okay, well, I got it in the picture right here. We're going to make a new method called update placement pose. No, we did. It's right here. Okay, never mind. I'm just confusing myself. All right, so we are going to now, inside of this update placement pose, we're going to say placement pose is valid equals hits dot count greater than 0.
Are we defining hits?
We did right here. Var hits equals new list AR raycast hit.
I totally missed that.
Okay. So what this is going to do, this is an operator. If this is true, it'll turn, if this statement is true, greater than 0, it will set placement pose as valid as true. If it's not greater than 0, it will leave it as false or set it to false. Okay, so then we're going to say after this, we're going to put an if statement. If, and the way that works is you have an if and then an open parentheses. Placement post is valid. No, go back. There it is. Placement pose is valid. And that's all you have to put actually, because what this is implying is if placement pose is valid equals true. You don't have to type that all out. You just have to say if placement pose is valid. If you want it to be if placement pose is false, valid is false, you just have to say exclamation point placement pose is valid. It's a shortcut. Okay, we don't want the exclamation point though. We want to do it if placement pose is valid, open curly bracket, close curly bracket, put in a return, give yourself some space. And in here we're going to put placement pose equals hits. We're taking the first hit, which is going to have index 0, so that's inside of a bracket. This is referencing something in a list. Whenever you see brackets like that, you're either talking about a list or you're talking about an array, which is also a list. It's just kind of a different type of list. And this is the index number, which is which position in that list are you talking about. 0 is the first one. It counts from 0 up. Okay, so we're saying hits.hits0.pose. So it's taking the pose of the first hit in the list that was populated by ARFoundation hit through all of this malarkey up here. Okay, and make sure you put your semicolon. And this will, basically what's going to happen here is this will constantly update the placement, pose, orientation, and position. But this is just a descriptor. This is just going to give us where to put the thing and whether to put the thing. What we actually need to do to make it work is attach the pose to a game object that we can populate with our placement indicator game object. So we're going to define a game object in our code called public game object placement indicator at the top above the private objects. So I like to, when I'm defining all my objects at the top, I like to have all my publics grouped together and all my privates grouped together. That way you can just get them sorted easier. So up here put public game object and placement, call this placement indicator. Placement indicator. And a semicolon. And what is a public, can anybody tell me what a public variable will do as opposed to a private? If you've ever done C#, you should kind of know this maybe. Anybody? Boom! So in your inspector, inside of the Unity editor, when you put this script onto a game object, in the inspector, any of your public variables will show up there and you can stick things in them. Or you can have it be like a float or something where you can change the value of it and put data in. We're going to actually put our placement indicator game object in this public game object called placement indicator. All right, so where was I? I got so excited I lost my place. Okay, here we are. Okay, so now we got that, and now we're going to create a new private void at the bottom. Make sure you're outside of the bracket for this private void. Make sure they're like lining up, basically right before the last bracket. I'm going to give myself an extra line, and I'm going to create something called private void update placement indicator. Open close parenthesis, new paragraph, curly bracket, hit another enter to give yourself some room. You'll notice, let me just stop for a second and tell you something. This is a standard way of coding, that most of my variables start with a lowercase letter and then the different words, it camel caps. So it starts with a lowercase and then the next word is an uppercase letter. But functions always start with an uppercase letter. That's kind of like, that's how you can quickly tell that this, I'm talking about a function or a method. They're basically synonymous terms. You'll hear me use them. The uber correct way is saying method. I'm really used to saying function, but they're basically the same thing. But that's a quick way of being able to tell the difference between a function and a variable, is whether it's a capital letter or a lowercase letter. Also, functions almost always have this open close bracket after it, or maybe there's some data inside of those brackets if you need to send it data to make it work. Okay, so we got our update placement indicator, and basically we are going to have some conditional here that we're going to look at whether the placement pose is valid. If open parenthesis placement pose is valid, open close curly bracket, add a new line, placement indicator dot set active true. What do you think that's going to do? It'll turn it on. Yeah, and then right now it's on in our editor. So we would either want to start with our editor having it turned off, but then once it was on, it would always stay on. And in fact, we want to, if you move the camera and it's not intersecting anything, we want it to turn that placement indicator back off. So we need to have an else statement after this called else. You don't need any parentheses because it's basically anything else. Curly brackets, placement indicator dot set active, whoops, set active false.
So if you don't add the else, it'll just be all the time?
It'll be, if you had it turned off in your Unity editor, the first time you got a active, the first time your Raycast manager returned a hit list greater than 0, it would turn it on and nothing would turn it off again. So this makes sure that it actually turns off when we go back to not having a list with any items in it. Okay, so save this code. Make sure you don't have any red underlying errors. What, you need to see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when it retrieves the hits, like hits.pose,
Mm-hmm.
what is it actually retrieving?
So it takes all those different hits and puts them in a list called hits.
Okay.
That list is more than just the name of it. It's the actual trackable type that it hit. And that trackable type has all types of different parameters to it. One of those parameters is the pose, which actually tells you its orientation and position. So we're taking the pose parameter from the first item listed in the hits. And we're using that pose to put to this thing called placement pose. And what are we doing with the placement pose? Did I forget to put something? Yes, I did actually. Placement pose is valid. Placement. Yeah, actually, good thing you asked this because I think I forgot something. So if placement, yes, I did. Okay, so if you already went back to your editor, go back to this. Underneath this, where we're setting it active, right now we're turning it on, but we're not setting its position. We need to actually set that pose as the position of the placement indicator so that it moves to be where the pose says it should be, because that's what we're supposed to do. All right, ha ha ha. All right, so say placement indicator dot transform dot set position and rotation. Okay. Open parenthesis, placement pose. No, not dot. Comma. No, sorry. I use a dot. Sorry. Placement pose dot position, comma, placement pose dot rotation. Close bracket. Semicolon, I think. Yes. Okay. So this function called set position and a rotation needs a position and a rotation. And so we're saying the position is placement pose dot position, which is where we detected that placement pose is positioned to be, and the rotation is the rotation that's coming from this placement pose. So now save this code. All right, so it should be called AR tap controller, and if we go back into Unity, we should have our AR tap controller here, and we are going to attach this script to the AR session origin object. So all you have to do is drag it from your scripts till it's highlighted over the AR session origin. And if you click on that, you'll see that it added your AR raycast manager, it added your AR plane manager, and now you also have this AR tap controller with a placement indicator that currently says none, right? So first thing, let's go ahead and put our placement indicator in this public placement indicator variable that we set. So going to, what is it, materials? No, it's right here. It's in your hierarchy. So click on AR session origin. You see the script right here. Drag placement indicator from your hierarchy to the placement indicator field in the inspector, and it should put AR placement indicator in there. And notice it's not blue because it's not a prefab. It's something that's actually in your hierarchy and hasn't been saved as a prefab. What? Did you add your script to your AR session origin? Oh, your script, you have errors in your script? Okay. Yes, question. Okay.
I think I'm not sure the virtual problem or some problem. So I just wait till you finish everything. Because I found the Unity.
Okay, you probably are missing a bracket somewhere.
No. I mean, from the beginning, they still have the right line. I think probably the virtual issue.
Have you not installed ARFoundation, the ARFoundation to your...
I just updated mine from the 18 to 19.
Yeah. So let's go back into your Unity editor real quick. Yeah, and do you have an AR session origin, so you do have it.
Yeah.
So let's see, go back into your script, and let's see if there's anything. Let me open my script real quick.
I think it's the same, just to,
do not have, I don't have raycast manager.
Make sure you have your collections in there and that you have those correct. Let's see. This is System collections, generic collections, Unity engine, ARFoundation, and two subsystems. Okay. Require components. So what's going on here? It says, I
Yeah,
can't
it
read that.
is that they can find this group something.
Okay.
Sure.
I think probably download them because I think because it's still not show the game object. I think it's weird. So,
Your Visual Studio, mine is a 2019, yours is a 2017 Visual Studio. What version of Unity do you have installed?
I just updated to 19.
Okay.
Is that issue?
And do you have 19 installed? Is this in Unity 19 right now?
Yes, 19.
Yeah. Okay. So the people who have Unity 2017, is anybody's working? Yours is working. Okay.
Unity 2019, but well, I don't have I have the tap controller, but I don't have.
Right, but it didn't add those components. Let's go back into your script real quick. Okay. So those and
Yeah,
yours doesn't have. Okay, so there's a few things. Your
Yeah.
So okay. Also, it won't add the script if there are other compiler errors. So there's one compiler error I can see there. It's count, not counts. That should fix that. Now, is there any other red lines? Save it. No, I don't think it automatically. Maybe it does. I don't know. Well, yeah, you just saved it. All right. So go back into and pull it out and put it back in again. Try that. Get rid of it. Right click on it. Right click on the name and say remove component. Now to put it back in there, drag it to the AR session. There. Now it did it. Okay. So I think what's going on with yours is just that you have a compiler error somewhere that's causing all this problems. And so then you can't put it, if you have compiler errors, you can't attach the script correctly to your object until it builds without problems. So we need to figure out why you have all these.
I mean, in the beginning, when I typed this thing, it still have the right line.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just.
Wow, why is it doing it on system collections? You don't even have system for some reason.
Yeah, I think probably.
It's looking in the wrong place maybe, or.
I usually use my mother computer and I also update the visual. So I probably that issue from the
Okay.
missing something.
Yeah. Yeah, you're missing some sort of system file.
Yeah, I think it don't have the source inside. I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know either. You'd have to do probably some Google searching to figure out why you're not able to add your collections. Let me see if Mark can look at yours for a second. Let's see what's going on with.
Do I need AR core at some point?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
This was where
Nothing was
it
working for
was
her.
not
She
right.
didn't have this.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
There we go.
Oh
Ooh.
my God,
Will you look at her? Look at hers and see if maybe
wait, no,
she has
I
the
saw
same
it.
sort of problem. Sure. What now?
Just red lines.
Oh, what is it saying?
Oh, you have red every
First
year.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
when I
no.
type this at the beginning, you still have the right line.
Oh
And
my
this
God.
shows some I don't have this.
It would have
Oh,
cleared
there
your
we go.
search.
It's just a set you're missing something. So I think because the source, I don't have the source in the visual. Probably when I download, I just
What does that say?
I don't
What does
think it's the
error
coding
say?
thing.
How do I see
I
those?
don't know. I
Is it
normally,
yours?
mine just pops up.
Yeah.
Message. Click on it. There.
Is this your
Type forwarder, type system object in assembly net standard causes a cycle.
can I move one of your
Is not defined or anything.
Yeah. It's not
Tab,
a
Tab type is not.
I'm wondering if that's making it go what the fuck.
Hey, Mia.
Um,
Can I move one?
because it is very strange
Is
that this is red.
something.
Mine is not
Um,
long.
yeah, so that
I've
is
checked
the
like 4 times.
Okay,
Hey,
could
can
you
you know, so
go into here
maybe,
for something
like,
that
this
says
look like I mean,
If you're
I
left, right?
kept checking.
Oh wait, I don't have mine developed on mine. Crap.
But I don't think it is.
Um,
I checked like a bunch of.
Can I find something on
I
your
typed
version?
this, maybe
Yes.
Well, also like all the times where
Oh, it's the editor.
I just noticed like this rainbow in this project. Oh, it's this stupid. All the times where I like chose something out of the list, your list wouldn't pop up like that sometimes, right? It does.
Oh, I see.
That's why I would be
Oh,
surprised
closer
if
to
I
you.
because everything is this type of.
Yeah, yeah. So that's not the issue.
Maybe I need to like update visual community.
What version is this
Never understand why this course is free credit.
about Visual Studio Community? Oh wow. I have Visual Community 2019, which I wonder if it's just you need to update your Visual Community.
Yeah, why don't I just try to do
Can you
It's
do
not
that?
it's just I'm making
Okay.
some
Thanks, Jack.
Yeah.
in the software.
Okay, so did you yours built okay? Yours built okay, and yours you got it working too. So this half gets the star, the gold star. All right. Yeah. People with problems. I'm sorry. I don't have time because it's already.
10 minutes left.
We only have 10 minutes left, and we've only gotten through like half of it.
Oh.
So we're not even going to come close.
Do I update?
How do you update Visual Studio? Is that probably because you had an older version of Unity installed?
Yeah, I'm like trying to copy.
Of Unity? I have like 2019 of Unity, so maybe that's what it is. It's just not recognizing.
I have to type it.
Because I am.
Because you already show that.
So here, Charlotte, go to Google and type in Visual Studio 2019,
I thought I could do it like.
and then go to that and say download Visual Studio Community 2019. Okay. And let's go from there. Okay, so for this side of the table, let's see what we can get done. For everybody else, your homework is going to be to get this to work and hopefully get to where we get. And hopefully we can figure out and iron out these errors, because if we can't, if we're having half the class not being able to do this every week, this is going to be a bear. Okay, so now we are going to go back to, we're going to go back and we're going to actually build this to our apps. And what we should see is, oh, can I do it on, I'll try to do it on this. That's not the right.
So you can't like build and run on Apple phones, right?
You can. I think you have to do it once to your Xcode and maybe have your Xcode open still from the last time you did it.
Okay. So just do regular build, right?
Yeah, you can just do a regular build the first time until you get it working. Yes. Yeah. You can just delete your old ones as you feel fit, as you see fit. Why can't I plug that in? There we go. Okay. So Unity build settings. Let me make sure I still have this set to. No, I have it on Android. And I want to switch back to iOS. I'm going to switch platform. And hopefully my player will still be good. Importing assets. So go ahead and build it. And then go ahead and load that to your phone and see if you can get it running. I have to switch because I was doing development in Android last. Oh. Ha. There's something we forgot. on detection mode over here on the AR plane manager. Right now it says everything. Click on that and click uncheck vertical, and it should change that to horizontal because we just want horizontal planes for now. And then build it again. Sorry. Yeah, uncheck vertical, and then it should say in detection mode, it should say horizontal. Just let it build and do it again. Sorry. All right, so I guess we're not even going to get to placing the object. We're just going to get this to work. And what can we do for this with this for homework? Well, I mean, you can replace the content, but that'll take you guys 5 minutes. What I'd really like you to do is, okay, here's what we're going to do. I am going to record the rest of this class and put it up on YouTube tomorrow. And your homework is to do that and get caught up to where we should be. Okay? So I will put it on the website tomorrow. It'll probably be done in the afternoon tomorrow. And so check the website under week 2, and there'll be a video from today's screen recording and also a video called Lesson Update. And your homework is to code along with me in the video and get that working so that we can continue on next week with what we should have had done this week. And it's my fault. I thought I would get further than I got. And I think the time we spent on the code was important so that you guys understand what's going on. It's one of my teaching philosophies that you should understand the code as much as you can, because otherwise you're just typing in letters and they don't mean anything, right? So yeah, I'll update the homework assignment that's on there now, but basically we're gonna finish up. And if you had problems today and you couldn't even get this much done, then make sure that you either see Mark during his office hours, which are on Monday at 12:30 to 2 o'clock or something. No, to 12. It's an hour and a half, right? 12:30 to 2. Yeah, here, 12:30 to 2 on Monday. Or email me and set up a time for us to meet. And I'm available most of the day tomorrow, although I'll probably be recording this lesson tomorrow afternoon. Or I'll be available on Monday in the morning. I'm available almost all day on Tuesday. Wednesday, I have a lot of availability as well. So if you're having problems, make sure you are seeing either Mark or me to get those problems out, because really, I really need everybody to be on the same page next week and for all of our programs to work, and mostly all of our coding platforms to work, because if every week we can't even get code that we typed in correctly to work, then this is going to be a real problem, right? So yeah, got to sort all that stuff out. All right, so for the team right-hand side of the room. Oh, did you set your sphere size to 1 instead of 0.1?
Well, not the sphere, just the Apollo logo.
Oh, the Apollo logo. Did I forget to change that to 0.1? I think I did. Wah, wah, wah. But you got in a logo, which means it was working.
Yes.
Because you wouldn't have seen it if you weren't detecting planes.
Yep, it's detecting this.
All right, she wins. So go back into your code and change the scale to 0.1 by 0.1.
Okay.
Scale of the quad.
The scale of the quad. Well, yes, scale of the quad.
Something I missed while I was doing other things, the material that is transparent. I keep when I put it in, I'm getting a black texture instead of transparent texture.
Okay, so in your editor, you need to first of all make sure that the texture, not the material, but the texture is set to alpha is transparency.
I've done that.
All right, so you got that. Then in your material, make sure that this shader is unlit / transparent.
I've done that.
Well, then it should work.
Oh, I'm doing mobile unlit.
No, unlit. Just regular unlit.
Standard unlit.
Standard unlit,
Okay,
transparent. Okay, let's see if I can get the big, huge placement indicator. All right, so what do? I click on this and I hit play, right? Build failed. Maybe because it just went to sleep right as I was hitting it. Yeah, and play. Build failed. Why?
You have your team.
What?
Your team.
I had my team. Is that what? Let's see.
Signing doesn't say team, just no.
Oh, you're right. Ha ha ha. Oh, Charlotte, did you do that? Maybe that was your problem. That you put your team here? Thank you. Okay.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. All right, here we go. That you have to fill in your signing here. Even if you have automatic signing, it's kind of annoying. Don't go to sleep. What was that from? Don't go to sleep.
I just remembered something that was
Oh, I know what it's from. I think it's from that Yoda movie, a Yoda YouTube video. Don't go to sleep.
Yeah.
Don't go to sleep.
That's a really good movie.
Thank you.
lot of
Oh, you fixed it. Nice.
No. Red lines.
Here come the red lines.
Wait, it's just this one now.
Rockin', rockin' and rollin'. Hey, here we go. Mine's launching. Down to the beach I'm strolling. But mine's not building either. What's going on? Oh, there it is. I don't have this plane. I've got no plane. I'm plane crazy.
There it is. You got
There's,
techno.
oh, there it is.
It's always techno.
I've got no plane.
Where's the visual techno?
Mine's not working. Darn it. Oh well. I've got some homework to do myself. Okay, so yeah, the homework is going to be get this to work and then do the updated lesson and get the rest of it to work. I can't get my placement indicator. Of course, let me turn on the light because a lot of times the bright light really helps. Yes.
I think I did with that. But I don't know. So I need to drop this to there.
What? Not AR. No, you put your script inside the AR session origin object.
So just to drag it.
Drag the script onto the AR session origin. Yeah. You have two different tap controls. Which one's which? Yeah.
Oh, we still don't have the
Can't add script because script class cannot be found. Make sure that there are no compilers and that the name matches. So why do you have two of them?
Because I tried to figure out which one is the one. So do I
So you can't have two of them name the same thing in the same place.
Yeah, what am I looking for?
Yes, good. Well, you got yours too. It's too big, just like mine. I mean, we realized why though. It's because we forgot to. Oh, there it is. Okay, mine is working, kind of. Although it doesn't seem like mine's on the ground. It's kind of like way up in the air.
Yeah, mine's like
Because then
floating.
this way, like, you click on it, then you see it. Otherwise, you have to do information.
So it's like either the pose isn't updating.
So, So it's
Or maybe I forgot to.
Loading, it's not.
Yeah, it's floating. It's not down where it should be. All right. Well, good. We're both on the same page, so I'll figure out what that is, and I'll put that at the beginning of the lesson, the extension lesson. Yes, go. Thank you. And yeah, like I said, I'll put it on the website, the homework. All right, point one.
That's what I'm used to.
Oi! No, good thing it's not someone's computer.
Here we are. 3D icons. Boop. Go away. Now it's now it's full. Okay, so the mean is out in the space. Let's get that back to here space. Alright. Here.
Yeah, all right. Well, I fixed the scale issue. I don't know that I fixed the update issue. Works perfectly on my Android device. All right, cool, guys. Sorry we didn't get as far as I thought, and I'll update the website and look for that, please, for your homework.
Again, everything works better without a Mac.
What was that?
Everything works better without a Mac.
So you have a PC there, right?
Yeah, no, this is
It's
not
Dell.
this is like not a computer entirely. Like this is
What kind of?
useless.
Oh, it's useless. Why?
But because it's a Dell, it cost me like $100
Uh-huh.
pretty much. So it's like
Pretty old.
cell phone.
Oh, I see.
That is it.
Yeah.
So no, I buy me a Predator, which is allegedly comparable to install OS,
Mhm.
which is that is my goal.
Cool.
And in the case it's not, I'm going to return it and try another until I find the one who can have both systems.
Yeah. The only thing I would be worried about is if you had an iPhone but a PC and not a Mac, because you can't put programs onto your iPhone unless you have a Mac.
Yeah.
But if you have an Android device, that's fine. You can be on either one, and you can have a Mac and put things on an Android. That's not a problem either.
What I want is have OS